All right. Apologies if I seem in the dark. Allow me to switch over. Blue, bloop. There we go. Something I've been meaning to do is take my Do Anything D6, and there are definitely some different permutations of the system I want to do, but ultimately I want to make some kind of more or less full-featured RPGs out of it, because something that I want to use. I enjoy the kind of system. I enjoy the kind of aspects of the system that I have played with. I think it could do a pretty good job at what's the word I'm looking for? It could do a pretty good job as a very easy stand-in. So one of the things I liked about using it for skills is when I use the system for skills, it becomes really easy to take thief skills or something like that, and I don't need the books. I don't need to look at any tables. I can just take what level the character is and kind of what they're doing, and bablam, just run it. And I can communicate that to a player very easily, and they can go. We can have it's very easy, very quick to get a common understanding of what everything does, and we can just play. And that's been my experience when I used it at ArcaneCon and also at Claricon, that I could tell the thief player, hey, you're going to get this many dice, and you basically get this kind of roll to your dice. And for folks who don't know anything, right, it's like, oh, you don't know anything about old school or whatever TTRPGs, it's very easy to say you want to roll sixes, and you can add +1 or +2 to your dice. Okay, great. If they're used to using kind of an X and 6 system, because they played some old school games before, I'm just opening my window here. If they're used to playing with the kind of X and 6 system, it also works very easily, because you can say, hey, it's like X and 6, and you get to 5 and 6s. Great. Off you go. Or 4 or 5, whatever it is. I think it's been kind of 5s or 6s. So that part works really well. Combat, you can pretty much work it the same. I haven't written it up per se, but essentially you're just using hit dice. You have as many hit dice, your levels. So you're level 1, you have 1, go on and go so forth. Then you take a hit, you get knocked out. You essentially get, Daniel in his game will call it defeated. Knocked out is another fine way. You're basically out of the fight. And then I think at the end of the fight, when it's been decided one way or another, then we can roll to see kind of, well, what has happened to you? Are you dead? Are you able to be saved? What's going on? What's going on there? So I haven't written it up, which I would need to do, obviously, but I got that. And then the last aspect would be magic. I wrote up sort of an ad hoc magic system that I like. I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of what I kind of thinking about here and now, just because I'm really looking for something ultimately that's really light, that if I wanted to play basically a BX style game, or not a BX style game necessarily. If I wanted to basically play a game that would more or less map pretty easily to BX isms, that I could roll. It would be different. I'm not trying. And I think one of the things I'm not trying to do is I'm not trying to make a retro clone. I'm not trying to make it, and this is going to be exactly like BX, but just different enough so that WotC doesn't sue the pants off me. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is take a system where we can kind of play. I could pull out any kind of game, old school kind of game I wanted to, do minimal amount of conversion, maybe none really, because part of what this system does is really your hit dice, your that number, whatever level you are, if you're a monster, your hit dice, that basically is the most important thing you need. So if we were playing Keep on the Borderlands, as long as I have that HD, then everything else becomes a detail that I can play with kind of or not. I can just say, okay, well, kind of like, and I think it's because it uses this sort of mass combat ism for everything. Like kind of like chainmail does, where, oh, you have your hit dice, okay, roll this amount of roll a bunch of dice, and then sort of what happens. Like if you're using the troop combat method from ODD would be from chainmail, it's kind of the other sort of inspiration. In that case, you just look at the HD, all the other stuff we can work with or not. I don't have a saving throws as of yet, kind of standing. That would probably be another aspect. And then what I was thinking for, hey Glitch, what I was thinking for now would be that you could tie into whatever spells you're already using. So if you have BX and you want to use BX spells, that you could just map the spells in a way. So I kind of figure out those things. But one of the things that I've been doing is, again, because I'm not trying to be a retro clone. So I'm not interested in things mapping one-to-one or having things be, I'm fine with mixing things up a little bit. But you're, again, like mixing it up in a sense that all the mix-ups are going to be, all the mixing up is kind of on the side of these rules, and that whatever BX stuff you would use or some other school thing you can kind of just take as is. So it wouldn't be about, Fireball would not work drastically differently other than the fact of how you're doing out damage. Something like that. So, or at least as close as I can get to that, if that makes sense. So I have these skill kind of levels, or I guess here I'm calling them expertise. I should probably, unfamiliar, basically, if you were to take a fighter, I should make an example. Let's like put an example PC kind of over here. So if we had an example fighter, let's just get something here. Example fighter, all right? They would be first level. Oops. First level. Oops. First level. They would be considered trained in, let's just call it warfare or warcraft. We could call it that, right? They're trained in /warcraft. They're trained in that, and they're basically unfamiliar with everything else. And in this case, I'm sort of using this list. If we were to break out the different characters, and I'm going to get to the clerics, because if you looked at this and you're wondering, well, where's your kind of faith kind of thing? Well, we'll get to that, because this is something I was thinking about, and I'll explain. I think you can kind of bottom line the sort of stuff you have in, say, BX. I know a couple things. We've got Warcraft, call it Warfare, call it Warcraft, whatever. Your weapons and your armor, that's where that goes, right? How good you are at hitting stuff, and then basically what kind of armor can you wear? Then you have your stealth, sneaking and hiding, essentially. You could probably put, we could put backstabbery in here too, I suppose, if we wanted to. That might fit also. Guile, I'm doing trap smithing, sleight of hand, and lock picking. Sleight of hand would also be your kind of pickpocket skill. Disarming small traps, blah, 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 lock picking. That's that kind of, it's that sort of craftiness, sneakiness kind of thing. And then sorcery, spellcasting, and rituals would be there. You could do, at this point, I don't have scrolls reading as a thing. There's going to be some gray areas or places where you could add, or in fact, some nuance, whatever. But we could put scrolls, maybe since scrolls exist. Scrolls, and we could maybe put, I don't even know, we'll figure it out. We'll just stick with these. And I was thinking, like, well, there's also kind of magic item usage, your things like your staffs and your rods, staves, rods, that sort of thing. We can decide. Maybe it could be that everybody uses that stuff, right? Because remember, I'm not trying to I don't care if it's like, well, in BX it does differently. I don't care. I just want to be able to kind of run the modules in a way that I think is kind of interesting. I totally have my own little personal isms that I'm probably going to throw in here, and some of my own personal flavors. So it's, again, I'm not trying to map one-to-one to make a retro clone of BX. There's a ton of retro clones of BX. I don't need it. But I'm thinking, using the kind of do anything D6 sort of system, like, what can I get to something that is very light, not adding, yes, I mean it to be very light, but what I really mean by lightness is not necessarily that when this thing's finished, it fits on one page or in one spread, something like that, but just that it's very as intuitive as I can make it to run. And like I said, when I was running my skills stuff at Clericon and ArcaneCon, it was intuitive to run. It was intuitive for me to run, and it was intuitive for the players to run, or to players to play in. I think everybody picked it up really easily and was just able to kind of go with it. So I want to maintain that. And then I think the more stuff, basically, that you can, a couple things I like. I like if I can keep the language as kind of just practical speaking language as possible, not have all kinds of funky terms. And the less that you have to sit and open up a book and find a particular ruling, the better. I want you to be able to hopefully internalize. You have to internalize and learn a couple things. But once you kind of got that down, then you can just play, right? And so these levels are basically like that. So if you're unfamiliar, so this is a dice pool system. I guess that's another thing. We're talking with dice pool. Maybe I should plop that in there. Maybe even move it up top. It's a XD6 dice pool based on level / hit dice. I'll move that. Where did that go? Move that up there. And then depending on, so if you're unfamiliar with something, your dice pool is halved. If you're familiar, that's basically the kind of your baseline. If you're trained, you get +1 to all dice. Skilled, +2 to all dice. And expert, +3 to all dice. And did I have? I don't think I had a. I have to go back because I just wrote this up kind of at the spur of the moment. So I know I think I used master. I think I actually have been using skilled in place of trained. I think I've been kind of naming them differently, but this is basically what you've got. So I think it's very easy. Once you learn the system, then when someone says, if you're in the middle of something and they're utilizing, and you say, or I don't know, they want to do something. I want to hack at the zombie with my axe. And you say, okay, well, how's your Warcraft? Like, I'm trained. All right, good. You're roll away and you're +1 to all your dice, right? Bang, zam. It's pretty easy. Hey, Brian Smith. Super easy to figure out. And it doesn't change that often because the progression is like 4th level. If you're trained, this would be the basic one. You could make it more complicated, but the very just, you wanted to play dead simple basic. Everything bumps up 1 level when you hit some threshold. So at 4th level, if you're trained, it bumps up to skilled. If you were skilled, it will bump up to expert. And then at 8th level, they bump up again. So a fighter that starts off trained and everything, by the time they reach 8th level, that kind of superhero kind of level, now they're +3 to all their dice. Pretty good. So for our example fighter, which is something I like about it, is you can kind of just, you could just have a character, a class that basically is just this. Like you can write down this fighter and just say, yeah, I'm trained in Warcraft and everything else I'm unfamiliar with, which, again, we're talking here, right? So unfamiliar meaning that your dice pool is halved, right? But we can make it a little bit better. We can make it different. So one of the things I was thinking of maybe is to talk about is what would be your, maybe actually, what I need to do? I need to make this a list. Hold on a minute. Let me put that. Okay. Let's get some character generation basics. And we'll move that up there. And we'll change the color. I wish it would do this automatically, change different colors. We'll go with green, maybe a little too dark. Okay, there we go. So we go look at some basics, right? So, and I've been thinking about this. What would be the general rules? So I think that your general rules are you can be, what do we do with general rules? All right, so we start off unfamiliar with everything. It's then, well, I guess if we do this in points, I'm trying to think, if we kind of make this in points, how many points would be? So we could say maybe 4 points. Each point raises a skill set from unfamiliar towards expert. So everything starts off as unfamiliar, and you can get to familiar at 1, and then 2 to trained. So at first level, max of trained in any skill. Maybe we should call the skill sets. Let's call them skill sets because they really encompass more than one skill. So we've got, all right, start off unfamiliar with everything. That would be that your dice pools have, which the first levels would be bad. Then you get 4 points. I don't know if we'll call them points, whatever. You can kind of pick, you could probably say pick one at trained, but whatever. Because I think the points allows you to be the most flexible thing. So if you wanted to be familiar across the board, you could. You could be familiar with Warfare and Warcraft, familiar with stealth, familiar with guile, familiar with sorcery. But that probably wouldn't be what you'd want to do. Or you could put one at trained, and then one, whatever. You could kind of go one at trained, and then 2 are familiar, and then you got to pick something, which is kind of pretty good, right? So you get 1, 2. So if we give 4 points, you could either do 2 that you're trained in all the way, or 1 that you're trained in, and then 2 that you're familiar with. So one of the things I was thinking about, if we kind of start to break these out a little bit, we kind of go in here and say, light armor requires sort of, no, light armor has no requirement. Light armor, you could just throw something on. Let's see. Whoops. So let's say no requirement. We could have medium armor has a familiar requirement, and then heavy armor, you need training. Trained requirement. So now we can see how we can sort of play with the system a little bit. Oh, you want to wear leather? Anybody can wear leather. There might, we might say that spellcasting that you have to be. I was thinking, because I just think it's more fun that spellcasters can't wear armor and cast spells. I like to think of this is. I'm kind of going, I think, for more of a sword and sorcery vibe in that I want, if you're making some kind of, I like going back and looking at, say, some of the Harryhausen Sinbad movies from the 70s where they're, I think what's the one, I forget the one. I mean, there's a few of them where they're this idea that you're sort of you are almost petitioning for some unholy power to do something for you. That part of that charisma, part of this kind of thing you're making where you're sort of portraying yourself to be strong, doesn't work if you're then in armor, which is armor and being acknowledgement that you were made of flesh and you were weak. But when you're trying to work with these arcane powers and let their stuff through you, that you can't show weakness like that. That was kind of what I was thinking. Who knows what the final shape will be, but this is just some watered down apple cider for the working man. That was my thought. We'll see. So yeah, that's concept, and we can do the same thing with armor. So we can think about I don't know, your sort of peasant weapons have no requirement. We can kind of set what those are, and then maybe we can do one-handed swords, axes, etc. require familiar requirement, and then two-handed swords and polearms. Let's see, would be you need to be trained. I don't know if this totally makes sense. And we could do, oh yeah, and or shield. Need to be familiar. So if you if you're looking at a fighter, now it kind of makes sense that they're trained, because then they get, that gives you everything, right? You got to be trained, and then you get everything. So what we've done is kind of looked and said, okay, now the fighter is totally trained, and we could have that be as 2 points. We could make it more. We could make it, maybe we say that if we want to get however complicated we want to get, we might say that each level costs unfamiliar 0, 1 is familiar, 2 is trained, and then 4 for skilled. So that it would be, sort of go 0, 1 to 2. Well, I guess it's 2 anyway, even if it was 1, 1, 1, 1. But then if you wanted to go up higher, it really depends. It's hard. It's easy to get sidetracked with these things. Think like, ooh, you could just do point buy every level. But I think just to keep it, again, I'm trying to be, at least for this initial version, I just want to be pretty dead simple. So I really just want to think about, okay, when you level up, you'll get another hit die, which is a kind of a big deal, especially you go to one hit die to 2 hit dice as you go second like that's kind of a big dealio. And then at these at the kind of hero and superhero thresholds, you kind of bump everything up. So because of the way dice works, obviously if most things require 1 success to defeat, then having, okay, if you get +1 to 1 die, and then you have 2 dice, you get +1 to each of those dice. Like those 2 things together, you do get a progression every level, because each die is increasing your chance of doing something, and then of course you're adding on top of it by getting the +1 to your dice. So I kind of get I haven't charted out. Should we go to any dice and chart it out? I haven't charted it out, but I think it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty good deal. It's not exciting because you're not unlocking some kind of new crazy ability, so it definitely a bit sort of toned down. I guess if you were a player or a GM that wanted everybody to have all kinds of crazy stuff, then this would not be the system for you, because you're not. Though I think there's some fun things that we have. So we got that, and then. Right? So sneaking around, but then, you're silent. So there's like moving quietly. Has, no requirement. Moving silently has a, maybe it goes trained. And then moving, leave no trace, maybe we could say is maybe skilled. We could play around with these, but this is another kind of example. So if we want to, part of what I like about this kind of system is that you don't end up with the thing you get when you introduce thieves into D&D originally, which was you took a set of activities that were not defined as skills. So number one, anybody could do them. They weren't, and there was no particular mechanic governing them. If you were playing just straight OD&D before Greyhawk and people want to sneak around, you just figured it out, whatever that would be. I don't know. I don't have, maybe it's written down. Maybe there's some blog post somewhere. How did they adjudicate sneaking around prior to the thief? I don't know. But you just figure it out and you do it. And anybody can do it. And you just, presumably whoever's running the game decides what does it mean if you have no armor on, like say a wizard, or you're wearing heavy armor like a thief, or like a fighter, Or if you're somewhere in between, like maybe cleric, what does it mean in terms of what you're rolling? I don't know, but you have something there. Now, once you introduce the thief, it threw a monkey wrench into the whole thing, because with the thief, suddenly there is a particular way that you're handling the thief skills. The problem was that only applied to the thief. So now you have, the thief, you're hiding in shadows. You've got 62%. Okay, but what does that mean for the fighter? The fighter wants to try to hide in a shadow or something. What does that mean? Can they just not do it at all? And people, this is that whole argument that people spend a lot of time trying to figure out up until skills basically became standardized across all classes. Basically was, do you let the thief roll twice? Once for their kind of supernatural one and once for what everyone else is rolling. So if you're saying to the fighter, roll under your dex or something to do it, then maybe the thief gets two things. They get their supernatural one and they get their roll under dex. Or how does it work, right? And if you're giving the fighter roll under dex, which depending on their dex, is going to be a pretty good chance, and the thief's only got 13%, like, how is that fair? Like, it's all, that's the whole argument. Well, why is it that the thief is worse at it than the other player was? Figuring all that stuff out. This doesn't have that problem, because everyone's starting with a singular progression, singular framework, and the thief is going to progress at a better level, or whoever has thief skills, whether we have, because the other thing is you can make this class list very easily, right? I can make fighter, thief, or maybe I'll just put one in here, but you could also easily do this with some sort of point buy where everyone's kind of getting what they want. So an example, thief at first level, might be, let's see, what might they be? So I think we might need to give more, because I'm thinking, we might need to give do we get another die? Give another point to the fighter. This is where I got to figure out the kind of the mathiness. So they would have basically, trained in stealth, familiar with guile. Or you could swap them up. All right, you could have that. Or 3, 1, 2, 3. They could be trained in guile, familiar with stealth. You essentially have those two. So, and then you maybe put a gap. Unfamiliar with everything else. Oops. So you could have something like that. Stop. I'm thinking now that maybe we go. Well, let's see. The fighter would get something extra, right? Because they have 4 points. They spend 2, so they could become familiar in 2 other things. Oh, I forgot. There was one I meant to put in here. Whoops. I forgot one. I'll add it in here. Survival. This is your hunting, foraging, camping, navigating. Something like that, which I forgot about. So maybe if we give them 4 points, they spend 2 to make something familiar, and then they have 2 points they can spend on anything else. Hey, Ian. I wonder. Now remember, I'm not trying to make, I don't care if I'm not trying to be exact to BX or make a 1-to-1. I just want to be kind of broadly compatible that I could throw BX-ish stuff at them at this party, and it would work from a GM's perspective. If they end up being more powerful, like they might be more powerful than your average BX, I don't care about that. I'm not concerned with like, oh, the power levels. Like I could not care less. Really, the thing is that could I create this where I could grab keep on the Borderlands and run it fairly handily is really kind of what I'm doing. And if it means that you could run with less players or less hirelings because the player characters are more proficient or skilled, then that's fine. I'm going to turn on one of my lights here real quick because it's, hold on a second. I'm just going to, so you don't see me getting up. Okay. A little bit more light for you and for me. Now you may be wondering, no cleric. This is because something that I've been thinking about is I think about just going with, I have to look at the cleric spells at some point. Because maybe if I was going to have an included spell list, it would be different. I think I just want to have one kind of like what sorcery is you are engaging with powers like you would. Like that's all. I think my idea, again, it has that, I did that ad hoc spell casting, which went along the same pathway. I was looking more at a sorcery sort of thing than a more active sorcery, or more of a swords and sorcery type sorcery where you're interacting with spirits or divinities or infernal powers than you are kind of doing, I guess what we call like alchemical or philosophical magic, where you're doing formulae and things like that. You're kind of figuring things like, no, you're engaging with powers like that, which is kind of what clerics are doing anyway. The thing that, of course, you lose if there's no cleric is, well, is their turn undead. Now, I kind of like turn undead. I think it's a neat risk-reward kind of thing, but I was thinking about is, well, why maybe everybody can do turn undead? That's just something you can do. Except the kicker is that you can't, you can't do anything else while you're doing it. Once you've committed to making that investment of, I'm going to pull out my holy symbol and start chanting and threateningly whatever, you can't go do other things. And alignment would play a role. I think you couldn't do it if you're neutral. You couldn't do it if you're evil or chaotic. You can only, this would be a lawful action. So maybe I'll put another thing here, right? If we have, let's call this building classes. And we can, let's another list thingy. Color it. Sure, we'll color it red, and we can talk about kind of alignment powers. And then we can have law, maybe turning and destroying undead could be a power. I'm not sure what the chaos one would be. I mean, you could flip it and have chaos be that you could try to control undead. I don't know if I like that ultimately. I think I'd want to have that be something that necromancers do, and necromancy could be a particular path of sorcery you take rather than it just being a thing of chaos you do. But I do like the idea that as sort of a carrot for joining an alignment, that if you go neutral, you get nothing. You don't get points for not picking a side. And then we could go for chaos. Like I said, I'm not sure what they would get. And I don't want it to be like, oh, you get damage, or I don't want it to be turning is kind of a combat thing. I mean, certainly it happens in times of crisis, but it's sort of a specific kind of thing. And maybe we do end up getting rid of turning and it ends up being something else. Though I kind of like turning. I don't know. It's kind of a neat, when it goes off, I think it feels really good as a player when you've been able to turn undead. I like the idea that anybody could do it, but maybe your odds of doing it are not that good. And that's why more people don't. I mean, we could even have, what's a word for somebody, not faith. I'm just going to call it fervor. Or essentially your divinely or infernally favored. Maybe you can let people invest in it if they want it. So that if we were going to do an example, let's see, cleric, I'm going to put in quotes. You might come up with, oh, I don't know. Again, this is kind of, this is what I like. It adds some complexity, but I like it. So you could have somebody, it's like, okay, I'm going to be the more paladin-y. Well, actually, let's just we'll just make one a paladin. Maybe that's the best way to do it. So let's say an example paladin would be that they are trained in warfare and they are familiar with, what did I call it? Fervor? That's probably not a good, I gotta find another word. And then something like that. I probably need to figure out, yeah, something like that. Or maybe they have to go, let's see if it's, let's see. So medium armor and shield would be familiar. So maybe they do familiar. Well, no, I guess it would be train. Never mind, I'll do train. But I'll take out the sorcery. All right, so, and now I'll do an example cleric. We could say they are familiar with warfare. They are trained in fervor. And yeah, I guess maybe that would be, we didn't do a sorcerer, right? So we end up with, okay, familiar with war. I wonder if I need to give them one more. I don't know. Because a fighter would get something like familiar with something. Because you can see here, maybe we just don't, I don't know if there's one. Do you need to have one that's do we need to have one that's kind of culture? Customs. Common customs, courtly customs, something like that. Would that make? Whoa. And so maybe your fighter is familiar with customs? Would that work? What else could there be? We got warfare / warcraft. We have stealth. We have guile. We have sorcery. We have survival. We have fervor. We have culture. So I kind of like, I don't know. I kind of like it. I like having more, obviously more options than you can have all together. I want people to have to make choices. Either as we're doing these classes, or if you did some kind of custom class. So then you have something that would be an example, ranger type. And then it could be, you basically take the fighter, but now we sub in survival. Actually, I don't think we need to put with everything else. Probably don't need to say that. And maybe the thief. Oh. We'd really have two things, which would be an example burglar, right? Maybe I should move the burglar up. Example burglar would probably be more about the guile stuff. What do you think? No. Burglar is really more about sneaking and hiding, I would think. And then a thief is more about that. Hey, Krister. Okay. And this, I think, is kind of what I like about the system. Is I can sit there and we just spend, I don't know, a few minutes, and they're super dead simple classes, but you just kind of mock them up super fast. And we don't have progression figured out, or we don't have progression is something I would easily, I think, at this point, have something like, you can use the guidelines from whichever class in BX. I'm not sure what it would be. You could do something like, what do we call it? The Arduin Grimoire kind of thing. I'll probably come up with something. But basically, you can come up with all kinds of come up with all kinds of permutations of these classes, and you can express them very simply, which is kind of the point of what I'm trying to do. Is I want something. Whoops. What did I do with that? Oh, example. How did I do that by accident? I must have. I meant burglar. There we go. Fix that. And I was just, what are you doing? No. Why are you doing that to me? Stop that. I'm trying to copy paste something and it's not doing weird things. All right, let's see if I can do this again. Control C. Exit that one. Okay, there we go. Okay. I really probably didn't need to do that, but whatever. So the basics, I think at this point we got 3 points, which I think is giving us a pretty good spread of things. So you get to pick 3 things. You spend 2 points on, oh no, I guess it's got to be 4, right? Because 2 points on one and 1 point on everything else. Or sorry, 1 point. So you get to spend 2 points on one, which takes you from unfamiliar up to trained. And then you can pick 2 other things, 1 point each. Or I suppose you could do trained in 2 things, and then you're. Because I was thinking, you know what? I think what I was thinking of was that you could only have 1 thing trained. Maybe it's easier to say you can pick trained in 1 thing and familiar in 2 things. I want you to have kind of I want you to make a choice as to what you're good at. I think I want to encourage a little bit of specialization. Not a ton, but a little. You know, I mean, it's substantive, right? If you're familiar, you're rolling all your dice in your dice pool, but you need sixes. So you've got a 16% chance of hitting. And on first level, that's only one. And I know it's 16.66666, whatever. Suddenly, if you're trained, you get 33% chance. Excuse me. So maybe that's pick one skill set to be trained, and then one to be familiar. One to be familiar. Is that how we're doing it? Right. So each one seems to be getting, yeah. And then what we can do is we could, if we wanted to, add in some more progression. So if we look at let's add another thing here, and let's do character progression. We have kind of a 10 level system. So first level, one skill set trained, one skill set familiar, 2 + 1 hit die, 3 + 1 hit die, 4 also +1 hit die. Trained skills become skilled. Familiar skills become trained. I probably need to work on the verbiage, right? 5 + 1 hit die, 6 + 1 hit die, 7 + 1 die. 8th level be the same as 4. Trained, and then let's see, but skilled skills. Yeah, I gotta come on that. Become expert. The 9 + 1 hit die, 1 hit die. Something like that. And so we could add, there's room in here if we wanted to. So one, this is very, again, dead simple progression. Because all you need to remember is you have 2 thresholds. 4th level and 8th level, which is basically your hero and superhero from kind of OD&D's sort of fighter progression. 4th level, you become a hero. 8th level, you become a superhero. So I kind of like looking at those. Just me personally, think of 4 and 8. Okay, 4 and 8. 4 and 8. Great. So that could be just, you could play the game, and here's the thing that's what I appreciate about this, is let's say we're doing a one-shot. We're doing a one-shot, we pick up an adventure, maybe we pick one up on drive-through, maybe we just, whatever, we have one off our wall. Let's play a little bit of this. Oh, but it takes 4th level characters. You know, it's so easy to do. Guess what? Your 4th level fighter, now he's got 4 HD, and he's +2, because now he's skilled, he's +2 with his weapons stuff. And whatever, right? Super easy. Whatever they're trained in, now they go up, they bump that up to skilled, so it's now they're +2 on their dice. If they're familiar with anything, it gets bumped up to trained, they get +1 on their dice. So you can level up or down your characters, or create a character at any given class. Now, granted, it's not giving out equipment and things like that, but super easy to do. Like, you're done with this part in 30 seconds. So now whatever you want to do with magic, however you want to do the rest of the stuff that comes to the 4th level or 5th, whatever level character, since this took you a grand total of about 10 seconds to do, now you have time. And maybe if this ends up becoming like a book, I could have some things like, here's at 4th level, you're assumed to have whatever, but these characters in a combat standpoint, because I'm going with sort of a chainmailish system, a kind of the troop combat system, your characters get they're pretty strong. So remember, if you're playing troop combat in chainmail and you're 4th level, you're rolling 4 dice every round against it. Now in chainmail in the troop combat, it gets a little bit. They do some goofy, not goofy. They do the mechanics of the dice work differently because they do something like, well, if you're fighting as heavy foot and you're fighting a light foot, then you get this many dice with this much. I kind of part of the thing I want to do with the system is I like that, but I wanted to simplify it out, which is why we have just 6s for everything and kind of thing. But you're rolling if you're fighting a normal person or someone with 1 hit die or less, and you have 4 hit dice, and you are a fighter, so now at 4th level, you need a 4, a 5, or a 6 to hit, right? Because you're +2, so you need a 4. All you need is a 4. You're going to be cleaving through these people. This is like that old school kind of fightery thing that people try to recapture in different ways, where you're just, all right, I'm rolling 4 dice. Oh, look, I got 2 4s, a 5, and a 6. Like, there goes your 4 peasant militia sent up to stop you. Like, they're gone. Round 1, ding, 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 over, finished. Now, granted, you might not roll that well, but you have basically a 50% chance at that point because you can get a 4, 5, or 6 are all kills for you. So you're rolling 4 dice, and you have a 50% chance per die of wiping out some poor peasant. And then you need to get 4 hits in a single round of combat to go down. So those 4 peasants who are going to need to roll 6s are going to need to roll all 4 of them are going to need to roll 6s, or they're going to need to have some kind of other advantage or something that either gives them more dice, or they got to have magic weapons to try to take you down. So fourth level, you're pretty good. You're pretty good. Right? So even if you're not giving away a bunch of magic, like, oh, in BX at this point they should have +2 shield, and this, like, maybe you're not following that, but you guys are strong. Those guys are going to be strong. And right now we don't have anything, right? Your thief, who's level 4, is also going to have that 4 dice. Now they don't have any skill, so they're only going to be rolling. In this case, the thief doesn't have any warfare familiarity, so this 4th level thief is only going to be rolling 2 dice instead of 4, but still 2 dice. That's their, it's not horrible. And the paladin will be up there, whatever. All these folks are going to be kind of in the mix. So it's I think I don't mind the fact. I think that's kind of the thing that the sort of, when you in Daniel's game, running the kind of chainmail-ish ODD, some things just don't matter so much. And I know he's had to kind of tweak things to get things to matter more, because some things just don't matter as much. Your magic weapons actually have a big impact on some of this. So if you have a magic weapon that adds you +1, basically what it is it moves you up. Moves you up the level. So if you give the thief a +1 dagger, they go from being unfamiliar to familiar, which is a big deal because they go from rolling 2 dice to rolling 4 dice. That's kind of a huge bump of itself. And if it's +2, then they would start to roll more dice. And if you're above expert, then it just adds more dice to you. So, the magic weapons can be pretty powerful, though as you go up in, they're less useful by themselves as you go up the tree, because you are an excellent fighter, for example. So the magic weapon itself, whatever it's adding to your fighting expertise, is not as big a deal, because you're going from, the margins adding ends up becoming increasingly small. But of course, it still has the effect that it's a magic weapon, in terms of if you're fighting a ghost or something, you need a magic weapon, or a werewolf, then obviously the magic weapon becomes huge, because you can't really fight the thing without the magic weapon. So what else we got here? So let me kind of recap here. So we got our expertise, right? D6 dice pool based on your level or HD, which is great. Your levels, I should call this, I don't know what they are, levels, but they're not character levels, but expertise. Well, they're kind of calling it, I don't know. We'll just call it levels, because we're inside the expertise umbrella. Levels of expertise go from unfamiliar to familiar to trained to skilled and expert. And I kind of go back and forth on the verbiage, so I'll probably have to switch that around to make sure it's the same everywhere, and I'll figure out which is kind of one I like better. Our skill sets, we've got warfare or warcraft, fighting stuff, stealth, guile, sorcery, survival, fervor, which is kind of like if you want to be in, and there's probably a better word here, but basically not faith because gods and demons and things exist, but what do you call it? Someone who's really, I don't want faithful. I find the word and I forget the word. I'm using fervor right now, but someone who's like really good, really, really has got that belief stuff. It's not, it's not belief because they're not. It's not about having. It's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because it's not about having faith. Like in our world, it's all about this faith because we can't. Right? There's no. Right? We have to we have to kind of. We can look for signs and things, but we have no assurity that there's something there. I think ultimately, so we have faith that it's there. We believe it's there. Right, we're believing in things we cannot experience directly, for the most part. But in the fantasy, these kind of fantasy worlds, piety, yeah, that might be it, Brian Smith. Maybe piety is a good. Maybe piety is a good word. Something like that. And I think this one might be an interesting one because it might be one of the few ones that might. I think maybe favor is a good one. Because I don't want it to be one that goes up and down. Because piety is something that you can kind of gain and lose, right? Because you were praying every day and you were giving me offerings and now you stopped. Or you didn't. And I kind of feel like I just want it to be a setting that you invest in. You decide, you know what, I'm gonna be pious. Or maybe I'm gonna be pious, or I have favor and I'm paying for having this favor, which allows me to do things that are like they go hand in hand with sorcery, but it's not exactly the same. So obviously these two go hand in hand, and you're kind of sorcerer. I guess I didn't put an example sorcerer in here, but that would be trained in sorcery, familiar with, I don't know, we'll call it favor. Something like that. Or you could flip them. I mean, that's kind of, and it's something that I kind of like. I think it's a feature, not a bug, that you can decide, are you better at knowing all the stuff that goes with sorcery, or are you more maybe touched, or are you more favored? It's interesting because you could go either way. The favored, being touched, whatever, having that kind of connection, a stronger connection with the thing trying to reach out to is good, but then knowing all the other stuff is really good too. So and I don't know, that's part of what I have to figure out for spell casting is, well, how do these things combine? How does this work? And maybe the favor is good for certain things and sorcery is better for other things. I mean, maybe that's what the cleric is, right? The cleric I had, well, the classic D&D cleric, right? But a priest maybe would have that flipped. Would have that, an example, priest would take these two things and flip them around. Something like that. So you get these different flavors depending on which ones. Now, I was going back to this. If you wanted to show, now D&D doesn't usually do this, right? You're a thief, you get better at thief stuff, and then you don't really gain any new tricks. I know they talk about it at the end of the expert book in BX that, later on in the companion book, which is never coming, thieves will gain some kind of illusionist ability. Something like, right? Okay, we get that little woohoo, but it never actually comes to fruition, at least not in the BX line. but I don't think it actually comes out, and the Beck Me line doesn't do it either, I don't think. Someone could correct me. Someone who's more of a Beck Me person, correct me. But I think that promise of thieves getting access to more magic doesn't actually come to pass. But we can give everybody more by, at some level, 6 level is a nice one to do it at, because they don't, it's kind of in between. You might say at 6th level, you can become familiar with a new skill set. Like maybe we could even say that at 3rd level too, if we wanted to. So we can kind of start to fill this out if we want, right? We could maybe even italicize this as like a maybe thing. Maybe. And I would be fine presenting a few options of, hey, do you want to have just a dead, like if you're doing a one shot, hey, just do this. If you want to, it's kind of like pick your own progression. At every level, you can have a super simple progression, which means that you're just going to be gaining hit dice. And then at these threshold levels, which would be 4 and 8, then you gain some extra stuff, right? And then you could have a more full featured progression if you want to, with some things you pick up, and we could even fill in some of these other levels with stuff if we wanted to. Of course, we could fill in, followers if we want to say, oh, hey, you pick up a companion if you want, here, the other, right? Great, kind of thing. And maybe for rangers, that companion could be an animal. That would be a nice thing. If you wanted to do the ranger animal kind of ranger thing, you can do that. If you want just to be, you don't want that, then you can not do that. So we got some options. We got some optiones here. Well, I think I'm going to let this sit and marinate. I'd love to get your feedback. Obviously, you're just looking at a bunch of stuff. And it's I think maybe what to do is what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And Brian, I'm not sure if you're still in here or not, but I was thinking also of your submarine. So Brian posted a great thing about a really cool concept for a game, kind of submariners. Yeah, it's not the Submariner. Copyright Marvel Comics. It's submariners, I guess. U-boatsmen and some kind of elder horror. So you're sort of undersea and you're jousting with Cthulhu in your submarine. And I was thinking at this kind of system, using my D6 system for that kind of thing. I had some interesting ideas with if you had the different areas of your submarine, the different stations, and that those had basically that if you wanted to have the sub essentially be something that you could upgrade or become damaged, then essentially those, for example, let me use an example. So you have the sonar station, and your sonar station, maybe it's a level 2 sonar station, which means that if whoever's at that sonar station can roll 2 dice, and if they're a trained sonarman, they can get +1 to both their dice. So a trained sonarman who has 2 dice, so they're 2nd level trained sonarman, or sonarman, I don't know how you pronounce it, sits down at that station, they get 2 dice, and then it's a level 2 sonar station, so they get 2 dice, which match what they have, they roll. Now, the level of the station puts a cap on the max amount of dice that someone can use. So if you're a level 1, and I was posting some links into the thread on this before, where they have something called ranked and unranked, and if you're unranked, basically ranked is like you're kind of showing your expertise, which is kind of like a level. So if you were an unranked sonar man with 1 die, you go to the level 2 sonar station, you can still only use 1 die. And since you're unranked, you would have no bonuses to your dice. If you became a ranked, but you're still level 1 sonar man, you go to the sonar station, you still have 1 die, but now they get a 5 or 6. If you're a level 2 Sonar Man and you go to the level 2 Sonar Station, you get your 2 dice and you get your +1 to both dice. If you were a level 4 ranked Sonar Man, so you have 4 dice, but you only have a level 2 Sonar Station, you still only get 2 dice. Like it's basically you're as good as you are, you then become limited by your machine not being delicate enough, not having enough nuance, whatever it is. Like you literally get kind of limited. It's kind of this nice interplay between your character level and your equipment level. I don't know if that's something I'd want to do in a kind of a fantasy game, but I think being that I'm guessing a lot of the action, I presume the action of his game is going to be kind of submarine based. You might have a neat thing about, well, do we level up ourselves or do we level up our station? Kind of a nice interplay with that. And then, of course, if you take damage, that can just lower the effectiveness. Like, oh my gosh, we got hit, and you can roll. It's like, oh, the sonar station's been damaged, so it went from level 2, and now it's level 1. And of course, if it goes down to level 0, it's just knocked out, kind of thing. So I didn't get to write all that in the forums. Maybe I will, but Brian, if you're still in here, might be something to think about. Maybe I'll write it up later because it kind of got my brain burning a little bit. But I like this kind of as a start. I apologize if it's a little bit scattered. I'm just trying to kind of get everything down, and I think so I can kind of look at it. And part of having this secondary channel is I feel like I can do that. And if you enjoy it, then subscribe here, and you'll get more of these. And if you don't enjoy it, well, the main channel, you won't be bothered about it on the main channel anymore. But we got this kind of basics about how the expertise works. We got a bunch of skill sets. Maybe there might be a couple other ones. I don't want to have a big number. I'm not trying to make a really crunchy skill system, but I like having some broad categories, and these map to things you're basically doing in the game, but also things that we don't necessarily want to role play the heck out of. I don't necessarily need to role play out whether you know the common customs of the culture. I just want you to be able to, like, them or you don't, roll some dice, move on. And I would totally be like, oh yeah, I know it, so you can kind of go. I really like the fact that the classes are super dead easy to describe, which means they're easy to generate. And I haven't talked about attributes because I'm thinking of just like not having them for this, just no attributes. And then, really what you want is you can do is just what we can do is, instead of saying, okay, we're not going to have attributes, but what you can do is do that kind of point buy or something so that you can really quickly create a character kind of customized however you like. So you can do all those kinds of permutations if you want. And then I thought it would be neat to give alignment power. So basically we're taking the kind of cleric turn undead idea and turn that into an alignment power. If you're lawful, you can turn undead. That's where that goes. Neutral, you don't get anything. And then chaos, we can think about, well, what might be a cool chaos ability? This might be something where you get to put in a little bit of your setting. Like, what is your setting like? What kind of things are you doing? Maybe we're looking at it and thinking from our standpoint that sorcery is essentially a chaotic thing, which makes sense. At least some of it might be. Maybe there's an advantage to being a chaotic sorcerer. I don't know. We'll find out. If you enjoy this, I'll be doing more of this. You know what? I'm going to bounce around, do some different things. Anywho, that's all I got for now, folks. Game on, and I will talk to you later.